Greetings, my fellow freedomers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit short, I would say. Maybe like under an hour, maybe over that, but not too far. Yeah, there's a few things I'm checking out. One's going to be about Donald Trump. And another article is going to be talking about, do you know about civil asset forfeiture? Plus, secret government programs, which from is on Prophecy News, and I got it originally tweeted from, was it Natural News? And of course, Dan Sanchez did one about the reap of blowback, we reap the blowback, and of course, add a video. I'll just make it brief, but you can see it for yourselves. So, without further ado, actually this one came from originally MiddleEastPost.com, and of course, before it's news, forward it. And this one here is entitled 21 Things That Donald Trump Believes. It was written by, who was this written by? Yeah, sometimes I like to get things a little bit bigger. So, let's find out right now. Oop, cracked the jaw there. Sorry about that, my friends. And who actually wrote this? I don't really say. Let's check this out. Assembled by Jessica Lunsenshop. It actually was on BBC's news. A little bit lame stream, but you know what? That's okay. So, Middle East Post. And it says here about Donald Trump, which everyone's fascinated with him, even with his hairdo and all that. So, I'll be very sincere. I've seen him speak live one time at the Broward County Convention Center, and all I have to say, in good faith, he is entertaining. I'm not here to praise him or worship him or have him be my Lord and Savior. It's because all the hoopla and the hype. However, it's interesting too that the establishment is really going ape or having a cow over him. He has his pros and cons. But they love the scapegoat. But I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not here to praise the man. But he has his pros and cons on his rhetoric. All right, enough of that. Let's just read here about 21 things that Donald Trump believes. And it says here, Donald Trump is the front runner in the Republican race to the presidential nominee for next year's election. What are his policies and beliefs? 1. Arab Americans cheered attacks on 9/11. Trump repeatedly claimed that on the 11th of September 2001 there were thousands of Arab Americans celebrating New Jersey after 2 planes flew into the Twin Towers. He says such public demonstrations tell you something about Muslims living in the U.S. However, there are no media reports to back up the claim. What? Like I said, if he still believes the Muslims are behind 9/11, he needs to get a hairpiece or toupee that makes him more intelligent. But I will continue on here. 2. There should be surveillance on U.S. mosques. Trump believes Muslims should be tracked by law enforcement as a counterterrorism initiative. He has walked back some comments about keeping database on all American Muslims, but he says he doesn't care if watching mosque is seen as politically correct. Well, here's one thing I could tell you. What's who he's being inspired by? FDR or Franklin Delano Roosevelt? Executive Order 1966 would be a perfect example for everyone should check out, which was in 1942 when mostly Americans, Japanese descent, most of them were tossed into the internment camps. I may just add a link on that too, just to have you guys look at it yourselves. All right. 3. the U.S. should use waterboarding, other methods of strong interrogation in its fight against the Islamic State. The candidate said that these methods are peanuts compared to the tactics used by militants such as beheadings. If that's true, has Donald Trump ever been waterboarded? Or he's be trying to be listening too much of CFR stooge Dick Cheney. All right. 4. Trump will bomb the hell out of ISIS. He claims that no other candidate would be tougher on the Islamic State, and he would weaken the militants by cutting their access to oil. Okay. 5. Actually, before I go on ISIS, hey, I say this. New World Order funded there, Donald. All right. 5. Create a simpler tax code. Trump wants anyone who earns less than $25,000 to pay no income tax. They would submit nothing more than a single-page tax that reads, I win. He would lower the business tax to 15%. He would also allow multinational corporations keeping money overseas to repatriate their cash at a 10% tax rate. Interesting about the business tax rate or corporate tax. I think the United States, there's claimed that the United States is like fourth highest corporate tax rate. I think it's like 35%. I could be mistaken. 35%. So if you lower it, it looks like he'll try to make sure he could bring back the jobs to the United States on expanding remanufacturing, bringing back the manufacturing plants and so forth. That's like I said, allegedly. All right. 6. Hedge fund managers are getting away with murder. Under the current U.S. tax code, Trump found common ground with Democrats like Senator Elizabeth Warren when he said that hedge fund managers and the ultra-wealthy do not pay enough taxes. However, after the campaign released specific of his plans, analysts argued that hedge fund managers would actually get a tax cut along with the middle class. Okay. 7. He wants to build a great wall between the U.S. and Mexico. In some of his earliest campaign comments, Trump suggests that Mexicans coming to the U.S. are largely criminals. They are bringing drugs and bringing crime, and they're rapists, he said. A wall on the border, he claims, will not only keep out undocumented immigrants, but Syrian migrants as well. He also believes that Mexico should have to pay for the wall, which a BBC analyst estimates could cost between $2.2 billion and $13 billion. Well, right now, a lot of Mexicans are leaving the United States as we speak because of economic crisis, economic issues, because they can't take care of their families. So something to observe responsibly. I just say, you know what? We should all just deprecate on the NAU. That would be the better option. 8. A mass deportation of estimated 11 million legal immigrants living in the U.S. should go into effect. Despite criticism, this idea is both xenophobic and prohibitively expensive. The BBC estimated $114 billion. Trump says his deportation plan is achievable as it will be humane. In addition, his immigration reform would end birthright citizenship, the policy that grants children of illegal immigrants citizenship so long as they are born on U.S. soil. He does not support creating a new path to citizenship for undocumented workers. Well, interesting on that. If you go to other countries and you're in there illegally, they have interesting perceptions or how they handle it. So 9. He and Vladimir Putin would get along very well. In an interview with CNN, Trump said that Putin and Obama dislike one another too much to negotiate, but I would probably get along with him very well, and I don't think you be having the kind of problems that you are having right now. Yeah, we all know that Barack Obama is part of the one world order, and I say that in good faith, not because of his skin color, political party, but on his actions. He does support imperialism, just like his predecessor, George W. Bush. So, yes, you're scammed. Yes, you're scammed. Yes, you're scammed. Okay, not yes we can. Yes, you're scammed. To all those Obama disciples out there, doesn't matter what you think of me on that. Too bad, because I say hell with him. Just another unmemorable politician where everyone praised and worships and had teary eyes over when he became president. 10. In order to end mass shootings, the U.S. should invest in mental health treatment. However, Trump does not believe that more gun control is the answer. In the position on gun paper on gun rights, Trump revealed he has a concealed carry permit, and that's when it comes to guns and magazine. And then when it comes to guns and magazine ban, the government has no business dictating what type of firearm goods honest people are allowed to own. He would also oppose expansion on background checks. Hey, natural law. And here's the thing about a lot of mass shootings. How come these people are not focusing on psychotropic drugs? I've been talking about that for a long, long time. And this person here is real critical. Like, we need tougher firearm laws. That would be the better answer. Yeah, well, England right now, they may not have mass shootings, but they had violent crime. So think about that. Anyone in England would disagree? Send me some memorable information. We can have a good discussion on this. That'd be great. 11. China should be taken to task on a number of issues in order to make trade with the U.S. more equitable. If elected, he says he will make China stop undervaluing its currency and force to step up its environmental and labor standards. He's also critical of the country's lax attitude towards American intellectual property and hacking. Well, all I have to say about this to Donald Trump, you know what? Let's go back to the gold. Let's go back to the commodity standards, gold and silver. Get rid of the Federal Reserve. Have Congress regulate money under Article 1, Section 8 of our U.S. Constitution. All this currency devaluing, a lot of it's mainly fiat. Okay? How long can it last? As in Latin. 12. The Black Lives Matter movement is trouble. Trump mocks Democratic candidates like Martin O'Malley for apologizing to members of the protests against police brutality and cast himself a pro-law enforcement candidate. I think they're looking for trouble, he once said. He once said of the activist group. He also tweeted a controversial graphic purporting to show that African Americans kill whites and blacks at a far higher rate than whites or police officers. However, the graphic cites a fictitious crime statistics bureau for its numbers have been widely debunked by using real FBI data. Well, I gotta say about one thing about Black Lives Matter on starting trouble. There's video footage. I'm not gonna say as a whole, but there's members. One incident that happened I think possibly in a college in Ohio. The one gentleman coordinator goes, if anyone is not African American descent, you have to get out or go across the street. Talk about Jim Jones syndrome. Something to look at, my friends. Watch out for these little movements. 13. Current unemployment statistics are wrong. Trump has repeatedly said unemployment in the U.S. is at 20%, once commenting it may be as high as 42%, despite the fact that Bureau of Labor Statistics pegs the number 5.1%. Trump says he doesn't believe that figure is real. Well, when it comes to trusting the government, you always got to question it. 14. His net worth is $10 billion. Based on Trump's 92-page personal financial disclosure form, Bloomberg calculates that the real estate mogul is worth about $2.9 billion, and Forbes put Trump's worth $4 billion. In a response, Trump insisted in a press release that he is worth in excess of $10 billion. He is self-funding his campaign and describes his start in the business world as a small loan of $1 million from his father. Okay, on that. I've been hearing those claims as well. 15, veteran health care. In the in, in the U.S. needs a major overhaul. Trump wants to clear out the executive level in the Department of Veterans Affairs, saying that wait times for doctors' visits have only increased after previous interventions failed. Thousands of veterans have died while waiting of care. He says he will invest in treatment of invisible wounds like post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. He also increased the number of doctors who specialize in women's health to help care for an increasing number of female veterans. Yeah, there are some controversies with that as well in the VA, in certain hospitals. I'm not saying all the hospitals, but some. And I will continue on here. 16. Obamacare's disaster. Trump says he favors repealing the president's Affordable Care Act, which aims at extending the number of Americans with health insurance, but he believes that everybody's got to be covered. A spokesman for Trump told Forbes that he will propose a health plan, will return authority to the states, and operate under free market principles. Well, I know right now there are states are doing that as we speak. I know in my last episode I talked about the state of Florida. There's a bill about the Freedom Healthcare. It's called a Freedom Healthcare Act, Florida's Freedom Healthcare Act, and it talks about steps of getting fading out or nullifying the Affordable Care Act. Well, to be very sincere, the Affordable Care Act is not socialized medicine, but fascistic medicine. If you look it up, read it, it's like 900 pages long, and you can make your own judgment on it. That's my view. In addition, I say don't just repeal that, but have the Congress repeal the Health Maintenance Organization Act of 1973, or Ancrim HMO Act. 17. Climate change is just weather. While Trump believes that maintaining clean air and clean water is important, he dismissed the climate change science as a hoax. He believes environmental restrictions on business makes less competitive in the global market. I don't believe we should peril the companies within our country, he told CNN on the issue. It costs so much and nobody knows exactly if it's going to work. Oh, sorry about that. And the whole climate change and global warming, when you got people like Al Gore speaking about it, yeah, you have to say fraud. But we have to always be concerned on taking care of our planet, including conform with the land rather than altering it. 18. The world would be better off if Saddam Hussein and Monarch Gaddafi were still in power. Trump told CNN that he believes the situation in both Libya and Iraq is far worse than it ever was under the two deceased dictators. While he concedes Hussein was a horrible guy, he said he did a better job combating terrorists. Yeah, so and there's even interesting about the Muammar Gaddafi. There's even reports that he was a Muslim, but he was against extreme Islam and he had secular views. So, and of course, we all know about the whole thing about Muammar Gaddafi, about the attack on Libya. They focused on the gold, and oil was secondary. He may have rough edges, but as far as I'm concerned, two things about these individuals, they stop playing ball with the global elite or the one world order. That is why they got attacked. 19. He would send back Syrian migrants seeking asylum in the U.S. Migrants seeking asylum. Yeah, I like it because sometimes the writing can be better on here. In the U.S., he said that the Paris attacks proved that even a handful of terrorists posing as migrants could do catastrophic damage, and so he will oppose resettling any Syrians in the U.S. and deport those who have already been placed here. This is under the Crippled America. I think what's funny about this, because what happened in Paris, some of these folks are Syrians, but are they paid by someone greater? We all know that ISIS is a one world order funded. I believe so. And if you're going to do that, Hey, get rid of the people. I said get rid of anyone that supports terrorist organizations, including affiliates from the CIA and the United States, etc. So let's do it across the board there, Donald. And 20 says here, Kim Davis should get another job. The Kentucky clerk became a conservative cause when she was jailed for refusing issued marriage license to gay couples because of her Christian beliefs. But Trump said, I am very, very big strong in Christianity and religion, but I will say that this was not the right job for her. Well, a few things I gotta say I have to disagree because one, I'm not saying here I'm homophobe or by any means, but one is the 10th Amendment. Two, the state is the marriage license from a state is a privilege. And three, there are even claims too that Kim Davis talked about the 14th Amendment that was never legally ratified. And I did brought that in my past as I'm available in my past episodes. You can look at some of the documentation, and you can make your own decision making. But the whole thing is this: a marriage license is marriage is a privilege. So the only thing I can recommend is the people in that state to change that in those laws. I think it's in the Commonwealth Constitution as well, of the state of Kentucky, or the state of Kentucky, Commonwealth of Kentucky. And the people in that county's got to make a decision too. I know you can't. But if I'm correct, there's no recall in that, but impeachment. That's really it. So the people of Kentucky got to make that decision, or the county in that state. All right. So 21. He is really a nice guy. In Trump's most recent book, Crippled America, he writes that I'm a really nice guy. Believe me, I pride myself on being a nice guy, but I'm also passionate and determined to make our country great again. Newsite Gawker points out that he calls himself a nice guy throughout the book, and Trump repeated that self-assessment in his own opening monologue on Saturday Night Live. Well, all I gotta say about Donald Trump, I don't jump on his hype. He has some good pointers, but how is it going to be done if he gets in? Congress is supposed to make these decisions. So yeah, and there's people out there, even the GOP, don't even like the man. No, I'm not praising them whatsoever. But start doing your homework. Always examine the pros and cons of every presidential candidate. But the funny thing about the mainstream media, they all want to scapegoat this guy. Let's get rid of Trump. Let's get rid of Trump. They're going to bring in they want to endorse some of these other clowns. Look at Fox News, for example. CNN. It's like Dumb and Dumber. The Dumb and Dumber networks, all right? I don't even watch these yahoos. So, this is really it. That's my main view on this guy. And you know what? If Donald's real smart, if the photo on the Middle East post, you see the golden ridges around these flags. Yep, maritime law. If he's a real American, it says get rid of these damn things. It violates the U.S. code on flags, the American flag. So it should never, ever be in there. All right. Next one here is politically related, but it's interesting. It's by Liberty Pen. It's on activist post. It says here, do you know about civil asset forfeitures? Government has a program where it takes a citizen's money and property based on suspicion, assume, without having to prove any wrongdoing. Senator Rand Paul has introduced legislation to eliminate the practice. There's a link on that in the Washington Post. Came out last year. And there's a video clip on here as well. And you know what? Let's go check it out, shall we? It's like 5 minutes long. Let's go. I'm gonna listen. I want to shut up, and you can hear it. You can hear it for yourselves.
Since 9/11, under just one programme, police have taken $2.5 billion in the course of over 61,000 seizures of cash alone from people who, and this is the mind-blowing part, were not charged with a crime.
Senator, talk to us a little bit about another project you're working on. It has to do with civil forfeiture. Tell us what that is.
Well, basically, the government can take money from you without ever convicting you, without ever even charging you.
If police suspect that you committed a crime, they can arrest you and put you on trial. At that trial, prosecutors must prove you are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But if police suspect your car was involved in a crime, they can take it, sell it, and in most places, pocket the proceeds to pad their budgets. They need not prove you committed any crime or even arrest you to take your property away.
In fact, the most famous U.S. attorney for doing this is Loretta Lynch. She confiscated $110 million worth of people's stuff, never tried them, never even took them to court, just kept their money. And it turns justice on its head because you're presumed to be guilty until you prove that you're innocent.
That's right. You can lose your property and money even if you haven't done anything wrong.
It's a very powerful tool to seize the assets of a citizen. But we also know that the way this really came about was, a lot of folks using that money in connection with drug dealing and that type of thing. And we got to be very careful about being able to make sure that they don't profit from that type of activity.
A couple weeks ago in Philadelphia, a teenage son was selling $40 worth of illegal drugs out of the house. They confiscated the house and kicked the family out. How is this helping a family that's struggling with a teenager who's on drugs to take their house from them? Right. It's crazy and it ought to stop.
With civil forfeiture, your property is guilty until you prove it innocent to get it back. And because most state and federal laws allow police and prosecutors to pocket the proceeds, they have a big incentive to pursue profits, not justice. How big? In 1986, the Justice Department's forfeiture fund took in $94 million. Now, it has more than $1 billion.
Motel Caswell, 2011, government tried to seize family's property, claiming that some drug incidents happened within the motel, but the motel owners, their property was seized?
Yeah, $1.5 million motel, and over a 14-year period, over 200,000 people stayed in the motel, and I think they accused about 6 or 10 of actually selling drugs out of the motel, not, under the permission of the motel, and then they take the motel. One of the reasons they took the motel, even though there are other motels in the area that had the same problem, they took this motel because it was paid for, and they can keep all the proceeds.
If police decide your money is suspicious, they can take that too.
Another case, Victor Ramos Guzman in 2011 stopped for speeding, not given a ticket, but the $28,500 in cash in his car was seized. Tell us about that.
Well, he was taking the money from to his church. It was from one church to the head church in another town a couple hours away. No one ever accused him of being related to the drug trade or of getting this money illegally. But it shouldn't be the onus on him to prove that he's innocent. The government should have to prove that you're guilty before they take your stuff. This is going on all the time. And when the Washington Post looked at it last year, a disproportionate amount of the people were poor, black, or Hispanic. And so this is another evidence of the war on drugs not being racist on purpose, but inadvertently having a racial outcome. And we ought to be very conscious of this because the people who are affected by it are very conscious of it.
Law enforcement gets to keep and use this suspicious money to pad their budgets. But wouldn't all money look suspicious if you could buy a break room margarita machine with it?
Like, how do you decide forfeiture funds?
It's usually based on a need. Well, I'll take that back.
Discretion, though, I'd imagine you sign off on.
Yeah, there's some limitations on it. It's actually there's not really on the forfeiture stuff. We just usually base it on something that would be nice to have.
When you say they take the money, remember something, that making those type of deposits under $10,000 repeatedly and not reporting that activity to the government has been codified against the law. And so, part of the problem here is that, when you take money from a civil asset forfeiture perspective, let's talk about the federal side of things. When the IRS takes that money, they don't get to keep the money unless they prove that you, in fact, did do something wrong. And that often becomes part of a negotiation in a plea agreement on the criminal side, or if you've violated the civil laws, something as part of a settlement.
Mm-hmm. Most people who've lost stuff to civil forfeiture just choose to walk away rather than fight.
We did that many times in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I'm comfortable with the tool being available.
It's kind of like pennies from heaven, it gets you a toy or something that you need, is the way we typically look at it.
And Senator, you had the president's ear, and what was his response to this?
The president is interested in doing something in this, but it's funny how the president will come forward and say he's interested in doing something, but then he appointed Loretta Lynch, who's actually opposed to doing anything good on this.
One of the ones who advocate for doing it. Senator, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Well. Hey, I gotta say one thing. I gotta commend them for this because the whole truth of the matter is about civil asset forfeiture. It's an assumptuous deception, a kind of sort of. Oh, I think this person's a dealer, but we can't prove it. But I can take their stuff. That's completely unacceptable. All right, even if you look at the U.S. Constitution, Fourth and Fifth Amendments, especially the Fifth Amendment about due process, and even in their state constitutions as well. So if all you guys got to look it up. It should be mainly Article 1 or 2, Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights. I'll tell you all about it. And I gotta say, hey, I have my criticism on Rand, but this one here, I have to commend it. So I recommend check out the link, look at the bills, and tell your senators, hey, I support this plan. I support his bill. It is essential because we gotta stop this civil asset forfeiture. It's been going on for a long time, and even when I was a young man in my teens, I questioned it immediately. So definitely check it out, do your homework, and share it to everybody. Because remember, there's no victim, there should be no crime. If you believe on civil asset forfeiture, you should be wearing an I Love Malte Sung button with that. You hear me? Good. All right. So next one here, gonna be enough of some of the politics over here. This one's interesting. Came from Prophecy News. Originally, I got this from Mike Adams. It was a tweet on Natural News. And this one's entitled, Secret Government Program Used Telepathy to Contact Aliens, Argues Investigative Journalist Jim Mars, by Greg Wright. Military-trained psychic spies were able to view non-humans on Earth and elsewhere through remote viewing, argued Jim Mars at this year's Secret Space Program Conference in Bastrop, Texas. Jim Mars is a former newspaper journalist who has written for myriad of news outlets, including Fourth Star Telegram. He is perhaps best known for his 1989 book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, which reached New York Times paperback non-fiction bestseller and later served as a basis for Oliver Stone's film JFK. See, I didn't know about that. SRI International developed a method of spying called remote viewing in the 1970s, which caught the attention of the CIA and was later passed to the U.S. Army. Remote viewing is a form of telepathy that perceives places, persons, and actions through extrasensory perception, ESP. Yeah, I saw a movie on that, unfortunately. I forgot the name of it, but it was pretty good stuff. According to Mars, everyone has the ability to do remote viewing. It is not limited to time and place. You can use it to look into the past and future. However, the further you look into the future, the fuzzier it gets, which suggests the future is not determined, explained Mars. U.S. military launches Stargate program. U.S. military program known as Stargate sought to locate and map Soviet Union submarines and using remote viewing. The process involved a group of individuals who attempted to visualize the coordinates on a world map to give the magnitude and longitude of the submarines. The program has apparently worked effectively for more than 20 years. Army intelligence officer Joe McMoneagle is said to be the first man to be taught remote viewing during the Stargate project. The original group consisted of 6 remote viewers. During the course of the program, there was an interest in UFOs. One of the best remote viewers, according to Mars, went by the name of Pat Price. According to Price, he found 4 alien bases on Earth. They were located on Mount Perdido and Pyrenees, Mount in Yangon, Zimbabwe, Mount Zion in Australia, and Mount hazes in Alaska. The organization originally filed the report away. In 1998, Skip Atwater, executive officer of the Grill Flame Unit, was responsible for giving members of the group's Oz task. He recalls prices for alien bases and gave them coordinates for each. All members came back and reported that all bases were on Earth and run by aliens. Mars believed that aliens had visited Earth many times throughout human history. Nevertheless, he believes the frequency of visits spiked the rise of nuclear weapons. Interesting claim there. The Aztec Incident. Mars also referenced the 1948 Aztec Incident as evidence that remote viewing has been used to communicate with aliens. According to various reports, a UFO crashed in New Mexico desert in 1948. Alien corpses were taken from the site by the U.S. Air Force, which many believe were dissected. There was a lot of controversy about the Aztec story. The reason not so many people know about the Aztec story, according to Mars, is because Aztec is near the Colorado border. Military officials have been tracking the object prior to the crash. When the UFO landed, military units in Colorado immediately rushed to the site and disposed the evidence before anyone had a chance to see it. In 2009, Randy Barnes of the Aztec Library Association contracted with Problem Solution Innovations, headed by Lynn Buchanan, who was once in charge of the Army's remote viewing unit. 11 remote viewers were summoned to take a look at Aztec to see if the incident really happened. The remote viewers found a large silver object designed for transportation flew to the ground. Many people had observed the object. They found biologicals in the craft. Some witnesses tried to help the creatures but couldn't do so due to language barriers. Eventually the Army showed up. There was some sort of negotiation among the parties involved. They took the biologicals inside the craft to an undisclosed location. According to the report, aliens could use remote viewing to manipulate their captures. Government officials couldn't let the aliens loose. As a result, an official decision was made to execute the aliens. Mars' claims are mind-bending and provocative. He draws multiple lines of evidence to support how remote viewing has sustained the existence of UFOs. For more information, check out Mars' book, Alien Agenda. Yeah, I've been keeping tabs on Mars. He's a very interesting man. And a lot of people still believe in UFOs and other extraterrestrial life. So the truth of the matter is, you gotta make those decisions for yourselves. I always observe responsibly. But anything's possible. I wouldn't be surprised because there's so much secret to try to shove down or trying to hide from us and don't want us to elevate or enhance our intellectual process and consciousness. We all have these biological energies within us, and we can do really unique things, which is unexplainable to many. Well, it's up to you folks if you want to believe this or not. Always, like I said, on my sites, always observe responsibly. Yeah, next one here. Ooh, sorry about that. This came from antiwar.com, written by Dan Sanchez. This is entitled, They Sow the Cyclone, We Reap the Blowback. Has a little biblical scripture here. For they sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. Hosea chapter 8, verse 7. It may be surprising to hear, but it is a plain historical fact that modern international jihad originated as an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. The great menace of our era was built by the CIA to wage a proxy war against the Soviets. A 1973 coup in Afghanistan installed a new secular government that were not fully communist, was Soviet-leaning. That was a capital offense from the perspective of America's Cold War national security state. at the time headed by Henry Kissinger. Conveniently for Kissinger, the dirt-poor country was sandwiched between two U.S. client states, Pakistan to the east and Iran, then ruled by the CIA-installed Shah to the west. Immediately after the coup, the CIA and the Coalition Security Agency of Pakistan and Iran, with the ISI and SAVAK, began regime-changing operations in Afghanistan, orchestrating and sponsoring Islamic fundamentalist insurrection coup attempts. Due to these efforts, as well as the government's own oppressiveness, a widespread rebellion broke out in Afghanistan in 1978. In July 1979, U.S. President Jimmy Carter, on the advice of National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, which we all know he's CFR proud, Charlotte proud, and a New World Order agent, officially authorized aid to the Punakil Mujahideen rebels to be delivered through CIA's Operation Cyclone. This was on top of the unofficial aid that the CIA had already been funneling to Afghan Islamist insurgents for years through Pakistan and Iran. In a 1998 interview, Brzezinski openly admitted that he and Carter thus knowingly increased the probability that the Soviets would militarily intervene. And indeed, Russia did invade in December 1979, beginning a decade-long Soviet-Afghan war. In the same 1998 interview, Brzezinski boasted, "The day that the Soviets officially crossed the border, I wrote to Carter, we now have an opportunity of giving the USSR its Vietnam War." Shortly thereafter, the higher cleric of Saudi Arabia, another U.S. client, endorsed a fatwa proclaiming jihad against the atheist Soviets in Afghanistan as an obligation for all Muslims throughout the world. It should be noted that the Saudis have a narrow definition of a true Muslim, as they follow Wahhabism as one of the most extreme and intolerant strands of Islam, highly similar to ISIS's own. Throughout the 1980s, Saudi Arabia also provided the Afghan jihad in hundreds of millions of petrodollars in aid and tens of thousands of madrasa indoctrinated volunteer fighters. The CIA also heavily participated in recruitment for increasingly international jihad. And as there is where Osama bin Laden enters the picture, a political scientist and terrorism expert, Iqbal Ahmad, said in a 1998 speech, "Money started pouring in, CIA agents starting going all over the Muslim world, recruiting people to fight in the Great Jihad. Bin Laden was one of the early prize recruits. He was not only an Arab, he was also a Saudi. He was not only a Saudi, he was also a multi-millionaire willing to put his own money into the matter." Bin Laden went around recruiting people for the fight for the jihad against communism. How coincidental is that, my friends? I first met him in 1986. He recommended to me by an American official of whom I don't know whether he was or was not an agent. I was talking to him and said, "Who are the Arabs here who would be very interesting?" "By here I meant in Afghanistan and Pakistan," he said. "We must meet Osama. I went to see Osama. He was a rich in bringing in recruits from Algeria, Sudan, and from Egypt. Just like Sheikh Abdul Rahman." The U.S. publicly lionized the anti-Soviet jihadis. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan, who continued Carter's Afghan plan, met with the Mujahideen leaders in the Oval Office for a photo op and released a statement which said, "To watch the courageous Afghan freedom fighters battle modern arsenal with simple handheld weapons and an inspiration to those who love freedom." Ho ho. The glorification even extended to popular culture in a climatic battle of scenes of 1988's Rambo's 3. The heroic John Rambo is about to be overrun by Soviet forces when he is saved by a Mujahideen cavalry charge. The movie closed with on-screen text to read, "This film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan." After the U.S. went to war with the Mujahideen successors in 2001, the dedication was changed to "the gallant people of Afghanistan." The film even has Rambo's mentor echoing Brzezinski when he screams at his Russian captor, we already had our Vietnam, now you're gonna have yours." After decade of bloody war, the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan in February 1998. Later that year, the Berlin Wall fell and Romania left the Soviet-led Warsaw Pact. Earlier the year after, Poland and East Germany followed. And in 1991, the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union itself both dissolved completely. Brzezinski arrogantly took credit for this, claiming that his strategy of giving USSR its own Vietnam brought the Soviet Union collapse. The Soviet collapse. But it was not really a collapse. The Soviet Empire did not descend into failed state chaos the way Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and Somalia recently have, thanks to the American war on terror. That is what the true collapse looks like. In contrast, what happened throughout the Soviet Empire was not a violent collapse, but a relinquishing of power and generally peaceful dissolution. Such an outcome rarely results from war. To the contrary, war is a health state, as Randolph Bourne taught. War tends not to loosen but to tighten the regime grip on power. It is not war, but peace and detente that can lead to peaceful dissolution when its people no longer feel so besieged by enemies abroad. They feel secure enough to demand greater freedom, given the extent of full secession from their protectors and rulers. It was the Reagan, Thatcher, Gorbachev thaw of Reagan's second term that created a necessary climate for ending the proxy war in Afghanistan, and it was a subsequent combination of far abroad detente and near abroad peace that created the necessary climate for the Soviet dissolution. Brzezinski's jihad did not win the Cold War. He only sowed the seeds for the terror war. In the 1990s, the U.S. seized emerging post-Berlin unipolar moment of peerless preeminence by launching its first global police action, the Persian Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, against Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq. Desert Storm was preceded by Operation Desert Shield, in which the U.S. built up military presence in Saudi Arabia, troops, arms, and bases for use in staging attacks on Iraq in the upcoming war. Contrary to U.S. promises, the military occupation of Saudi Arabia persisted after the war, as bases were used to enforce a blockade on Iraq through the 1990s, which starved over 500,000 children. This was twofold impact on Islamic radicalization. As Lawrence Wright wrote in The New Yorker, the presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia was a shattering event in the country's history, calling into question of the ancient bargain between the royal family and the Wahhabi clerics, whose blessing allowed the Saudi family to rule. In 1992, a group of the country's most prominent religious leaders issued a memorandum of advice, which implicitly threatened a clerical coup. The royal family, shaken by the threat to its rule, accommodated most of the clerics' demands, giving them more control over Saudi society. One of their directives called the creation of the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, which would be given offices in Saudi embassies and consulates. As journalist Philip Shannon writes, citing John Lehman, the former Secretary of the Navy and 9/11 Commissioner, it was well known in intelligence circles that the Islamic Affairs Office functioned as the Saudi's fifth column in support of Muslim extremists. Interesting there, my friends. The occupation of the Arabian Peninsula also began bin Laden's vendetta against his former patrons, as Iqbal Ahmad told him. He turns at the particular moment. In 1990, the U.S. goes into Saudi Arabia with forces. Saudi Arabia is the holy place of Muslims, Mecca and Medina. There had never been foreign troops there. In 1990, during the Gulf War, they want, in the name of helping Saudi Arabia defeat Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden remained quiet. Saddam was defeated, but the American troops stayed on the land of Kaaba, the most sacred site of Islam in Mecca. Foreign troops, he wrote an after letter saying, "Why are you here? Get out. You came to help, but you have stayed on." Finally, he started a jihad against other occupiers. His mission is to get American troops out of Saudi Arabia. His earlier mission was to get Russian troops out of Afghanistan. Even after this turn, the westernization of the Soviet-Afghan War, Mujahideen veterans, and bin Laden in particular, continued into the 90s. As late as December 1993, The Independent, as a major British newspaper, even published a puff piece on bin Laden's plastered on a huge photo of the smiling sheik titled, "Any Soviet Warrior Puts His Army on the Road to Peace." The article lauded bin Laden as a humanitarian, gushing over how the Saudi businessman who recruited Mujahideen now uses them for large-scale building projects in Sudan. As it turned out, his largest-scale project was to build an international militia that the CIA helped him recruit into Al-Qaeda, which he would then lead in an anti-Western terrorist jihad through the 1990s. With what waves of attacks in mind, Brzezinski's 1998 interviewers asked if he had any regrets over blowback from the Operation Cyclone. The statement was totally dismissive. Question: and neither do you regret having supported the Islamic fundamentalism, having given arms and advice to future terrorists? Brzezinski: what was most important to the history of the world? The Taliban or the collapse of the Soviet Empire? Some stirred up Muslims, or the liberation of Central Europe and the end of the Cold War? Question: some stirred up Muslims, but it has been said and repeated, Islamic fundamentalism represents the world menace today. But it's said nonsense. Later in 1998, mere months after the Brzezinski's interview, Iqbal Ahmad delivered the exact opposite assessment of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, warning his American audience, they're going to go for you. They're going to go for you. They're going to do a lot more. These are the chickens of Afghanistan war coming to roost. 3 years later, Brzezinski was proven spectacularly wrong and Ahmad tragically right. And when the terror jihad of bin Laden's Mujahideen descendant band on stirred up Muslims culminated in the attacks of September 11, 2001. During the planning of those attacks, bin Laden and his inner circle were hosted by the Taliban. Yet another band of Mujahideen descendant stirred up Muslims, then ruling Afghanistan. As Ahmad foretold, the chickens of the CIA's Afghan jihad and of the Gulf War has indeed come home to roost. True to their names, Operation Cyclone Desert Storm sowed the wind. Years later, it was 3,000 American civilians who reaped the whirlwind. Incredibly, that whirlwind was then receded, ensuring that still more civilians would later reap an even bigger whirlwind. Apparently, cultivating chaos is the only trade that empires know. The regime and the kept news media sowed the whirlwind by exploiting America's post-9/11 fear and anger to garner acquisitions for even larger and more frequent foreign misadventures for a glowing, globe-spanning long war that continues to this day. First came the Afghanistan war against the Taliban and in pursuit of Al-Qaeda. More inexplicably, Bin Laden escaped into hiding in U.S. ally Pakistan after being pinned down in the caves of Tora Bora. It is somewhat less inexplicable in light of the fact that the neocon-led Bush administration was trying to fearmonger the public into countenancing another war in Iraq, and that is involved pushing bogus intelligence connecting Saddam Hussein with Al-Qaeda. At least until the regime got its post-9/11 bonus war, it was convenient to still have Dread Pirate Osama at large to keep America's war fever up. Better dread than dead. Sorry about that. Get ready to doze off here. Forgive me. Similarly, in 2002, the Bush administration denied the military's request for permission to kill another figurehead terrorist, Abu Musab al-Zawahiri, who had in the 80s been yet another recruit for the CIA's Afghan jihad. That too was likely about the administration getting its war in Iraq. At the UN, the Secretary of State Colin Powell falsely identified Zawahiri as a link between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. He was allied with neither and an enemy of the former, in order to paint the planned invasion of Iraq as a necessary front in the war of terror. As it turned out, it was the Iraq War itself that unleashed Zawahiri in 2003, freeing him to emerge from autonomous Kurdistan, where he has been hiding from Saddam's security forces under the protective aegis of an American no-fly zone. His formerly obscure terrorist gang rapidly ascended amid the chaos of the Iraq War, becoming Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or AQI, after Zawahiri swore allegiance to bin Laden, and then the Islamic State in Iraq, or ISI, after the Zawahiri was finally killed. Wow, man, more patsies to take out. After suffering severe setback in Iraq, in 2011, the Zawahirites began infiltrating neighboring Syria to take part in the insurgency against Bashar al-Assad's regime. Thereafter remained itself ISIS, the Islamic State, in Iraq and Syria. The group, along with its offshoot, the al-Nusra Front, and other Mujahideen militias, came dominant in that insurgency. The growth of ISIS and Nusra in Syria was fed by the United States, the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA, and its Western and regional allies, the UK, France, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, etc. By at least 2012, these powers have launched a veritable Operation Cyclone 2.0, recruiting, training, financing, and arming Mujahideen fighters for the purpose of overthrowing the secular rule Assad, who, like the post-1973 secular Afghan regime, and an ally of Russia. Just as in Afghanistan decades ago, young men radicalized by the call to jihad and militarized by the promise of weapons and money have poured in from countries throughout the Muslim world and from Europe too. This was not only led to deaths of hundreds of thousands of Syrians and the displacement of millions, but has turbo-boosted ISIS and Nusra in myriad ways. You got a photo of Senator John McCain with Mujahideen from the Northern Star Brigade. Another stooge as usual. As recently disclosed, Pentagon intelligence reports revealed U.S. planners knew full well that they were once again sowing the Cyclone, and that other words would soon reap the blowback. The report from 2012 predicted that supporting the Syrian insurgency would create the idea of atmosphere for ISIS to return its old pockets in Sunni Iraq. Also creates the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in the region. And that is precisely what happened in 2014. Strengthened by the U.S.-backed Syrian jihad, ISIS burst back into its old pockets in Iraq, conquered the northwest of the country, down to the gates of Baghdad and declared caliphate, a Salafist principality. The wind zone by Operation Cyclone that took 2 decades to fully germinate into blowback that blew the Twin Towers down. Yet, it took only 2 years for the weep of the whirlwind from the Syrian jihad. Scott Horton proposes the term backdraft for blowback that is prompt and predictable, like the firestorm that immediately erupts in your face upon opening the door and burning of a burning hot room. U.S. and its allies have opened the door to hell in Syria, and the ensuing ISIS backdraft has lately spread far beyond Syria, Iraq, consuming 44 lives in the bombings of a Beirut marketplace, 244 lives of the Russian airliner, and 130 lives with the recent attacks in Paris. The Paris attacks especially have yielded yet another crop of fear and loathing in the West, which the tillers of terror are keen to plunge right back into still more proxy warfare mayhem, but they cannot do so if we, their tax cattle, refuse to plow or let them drive us like beasts of burden that are so easily spooked and potted. We the people must convey that if they don't stop cultivating the storms of chaos, then we will cast off their yoke once and for all. Nicely said. The whole thing is they use the same methods over and over again to benefit the military-industrial complex and the New World Order. You have to always look at things a lot broader than usual. That's how I have to leave it at that. And one thing I'm going to add to it is interesting is on a YouTube video. Pertaining in reference to the pipelines, and the title is the Unist'ot'en, which is a clan in British Columbia, holding their ground against oil and gas pipelines. It came out the 18th, and it says here, since 2009, the Unist'ot'en clan and its supporters have occupied a camp that is blocking proposed oil and gas pipelines in northern British Columbia, Canada. In summer of 2015, oil company workers regularly attempted to enter the indigenous group's territory, and growing police presence raised tension about the possibility of a raid of the camp. Well, this is pretty interesting here. It is like we have many other videos here as well. Check this out. Share it with everyone you know. And I gotta say, I commend these folks because they want to live off the land, not make it progressive. And of course, Chevron's involved. And one thing, one of the video clips on here, they try to offer tobacco and bottled water. That was an insult. I would have probably kicked that right to them, but they were a lot more, I would say, respective towards them. Respectively vigilant. Watch the video. It's like 11 minutes, a little over 11 minutes long. You can judge for yourselves. All right? Okay, my friends, that is all for now. Thanks for listening to this episode. Plus, feel free to download and share it throughout your social media network. If you have any questions, comments, compliments, criticisms, love letters, hate letters, or you want to send me something which I may find interesting, if you're going to send your comments, please use Decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, which, believe it or not, they did censor one of my episodes, which is I'm going to fight that, or World Truth. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is all together, at gmail.com. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.